We're going to move on now with a session input from Marcus Orlovsky. Marcus is part of the team, leader of the team, I think, at Bryanston Square, which is a consultancy and a group that have been doing some fantastic work to support schools and local authorities in the Building School for the Future programme. People often talk about think tanks and things like that. I refer and keep thinking of Bryanston Square as a do tank rather than a think tank. They do an awful lot of thinking and innovative thinking about education, but they also produce some excellent tools and do some excellent practical work supporting people in thinking about what a vision for 21st century education looks like and how technology can enhance that education. So welcome to Marcus, who's going to talk to us about staff development and whatever comes into his mind, I think, as well, Marcus. That's it. Thanks very much.
Well, excuse me, everybody, because when I prepared this 30 minutes ago, it looked damn good, but it might not be quite so good now. So I'm starting to get a bit panicky. I don't really understand all this discussion about handhelds because I can't operate without one of these days. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way. And it's not about the kit, it's what comes through it, which is much more important than the way in which I use it. So I'll introduce me to you. This is me. So I'm a bloke, about 50, quite fit. Well, used to be quite fit, own house, teeth, cars, and all that sort of stuff. And just to put you in the picture, we're working with the National College, we're working with Partnership for Schools, we're working on leadership teams, we're working on creating tools, we work with the private sector to try and help them design better buildings, we're trying to work with schools in trying to work out what they want to achieve. We have various other little bits of snippets from time to time, like we linked up a load of young architects with schools. We have about 140 projects underway on that. And we do quite a lot of research, and we publish quite a lot of stuff. And those are some of the projects we've worked on, about £4.25 billion worth of new schools in this country, about £1 billion a year. And just to put us in the frame, if I was to take a picture of what was going on in schools, and I covered 143 years from 1864 to 2007, and I'll just do a quick run through. We went from that to that to that to that to that and to here. And the world in that same period, from this world of 1875 to this world of 2007. So I'm not really too concerned about building new schools. What I'm more concerned about is what on earth are we doing to prepare people for participating in this world. And again, without wanting to sort of like go over old ground, the reality is that a 10-year-old today is probably going to be living until about 90, probably be working until about 70 years old, because it's preposterous to assume that we're going to be able to retire at the age of 50 and draw a pension down. Some of us don't even know if we're going to have a pension, so we're all buying buy-to-lets and whatever else we need to buy. And I don't know how many people actually trust Alistair Darling. And so we have all of this stuff going on. And so the question is, what's the world going to be like in 2070 as our 10-year-olds today start retiring? And we talk a lot about personalized learning. We talk a lot about opportunities and entitlement. There are actually 5,015 accredited courses available to secondary schools today. There are 379 GCSEs in this country, 243 A-levels. We have got 35,000 university courses in the UCAS guidebook for the UK. We do have access, if you're a European citizen, to 28 universities and about 14,000 different courses. Nobody expects to work in a shop for 30 years. And so we don't quite know how people are going to redevelop and reinvent their lives over time. And I think we get a bit of a fixation that in school we have a set of measures which is sort of like standards and results and grades, and the rest of society doesn't really care about that. It only cares about it at the point of entry. You know, when you're a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old and you first enter. After that, it's all about what you've done. So if there's anything which we can do as educators, is to try and showcase and try and be able to get youngsters to realize that actually it's what you do which is more important. And in this country we have a fixation about exams, and I know quite a lot of schools who teach kids how to pass exams, so they come out with a grade A, but they actually don't know their subject. What they do is they know how to pass that exam. Organizations into which people are joining are changing dramatically. There is much less hierarchy in the commercial world, much less. To the extent that in the commercial world, because we know that people are not going to have long stays, there isn't a job for life. And I think guys in the post office in the UK are just sort of discovering what it really means, is that we don't want people just to do the same thing for 30 years. And we expect more. And so because we have a short stay, we're having to try and attract people to continue to stay. And you will find, if you go onto most organizations, you'll be able to find the CVs of the key people there. You'll be able to find the CVs of other people who are working there. Because we're trying to show what we know. We're trying to share the knowledge we've got. We're trying to encourage an individual to go onto the internet to find out who else might know an answer to this problem so I can get it solved. We're not trying to get everybody to solve it themselves. We are becoming much more social. We are understanding that a lot of inventions, a lot of good ideas happen from the odd conversation in the coffee shop. And I bet it's happened here, is that you sit in a conference like this with people who've agonized over what they're going to say to you. You don't really care. Actually, what you do care about is what you're going to say to the other people outside when we're having coffee and when we're having a break. So let's just take a reality check for a moment. This is what the world is. And it's all about ideas and the future, not so much about your past. So if you talk to somebody and say, I've been 45 years teaching, you'll probably go, oh dear. Whether we like it or not, because you say you don't know anything else. And society's changing. We're becoming much more sophisticated. This is just a shot of a sandwich shop which I took in central London the day before yesterday, Pret-a-Manger. You know, and you'll see people sitting in different ways, having conversations on laptops, on mobile phones, doing business. You can do business today living in a little cottage in Bodmin Moor, if you want, and you can work on a global scale. Some friends of mine who are raising money for some schools in Lebanon did a first ever trade on the Lebanese stock exchange from the roof of Mount Kilimanjaro. So this is reality. And if we look at what's changed since 1997, and just in those last 10 years, in real life, well, we didn't have MP3s, we didn't have DVDs, we didn't have 9/11, we didn't have ASBOs, we didn't have Google. China was still a bit of a mystery. We didn't have Harry Potter, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have online banking, we didn't have digital photography, New Labour wasn't in power in the UK, we didn't have eBay, we didn't have multi-channel television, we weren't aware of climatic change, the high street in the UK hadn't been taken over by Tesco, people are worried about Benetton, we didn't have a ban on smoking in public places, we didn't have EasyJet, we didn't have ticketless airlines. If you'd gone into a coffee shop in most places in Europe and asked for a skinny double fair trade hazelnut cappuccino, you'd have got a thump. We didn't have MySpace, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have Second Life, and we never imagined the extent of large-scale economic migration which would take place as a result of the expansion of the EU. We had no concept of what that would do as we start getting people to really work in the global economy, and we haven't even seen the start of it yet. So let's not talk about handheld devices, let's talk about the 10-year-old today and what world is he facing. And you know, an awful lot of people sort of say, oh, well, the trouble is we're preparing for a world is yet to come. And of course, he'll be using jobs which don't, he'll be doing jobs which don't exist and using technologies which haven't been invented and be solving problems which we cannot imagine. And I am staggered at when I go around to new schools and I say, what are you trying to achieve? How few people actually take the time to work out where might that be going. What am I trying to prepare people for? What are Google doing today? What is happening in the health industry? Actually, what is taking place in the high street? What is going on in Latvia? What is going on around the place? It's sort of still fixated about my silos of what I'm teaching, or alternatively, my silos of how I'm assessing people's results. It is incredibly out of kilter for this world. And if we put people here, it is like abusing them almost, isn't it? Even whatever we like to think about the technology and the kit in there, can you smell that school? Can you feel it? You know, it's an authoritarian, hierarchical place. And, you know, this is an inspirational classroom. Come on. You know, it's got chairs which are uncomfortable to sit on, which weren't designed for anybody other than the cleaners. And it's got a whiteboard which you can't see if you're sitting at the back. So let's just get real. And we think that learning institutions are really a model, and they're a combination of a number of things. There is a series of processes which we apply to a series of people, or with a series of people, with a series of buildings and a series of bits of kit. That's it. And the processes, and if you look at most schools and you get them to write down all the rules they've got, it is extraordinary how many there are. Stand on the left, walk on the right, wear a right badge on this, and wear a blue badge on that, and 2 stripes on this one, and wear a tie, and all that. Etc., etc., etc. Some of which people haven't even challenged as to what they're all about. And they're sometimes taking place in a series of buildings with a series of kit which people don't know. I would guess, out of the work which I've done, and I probably speak to about 25,000 teachers a year, I would guess about 40% of them don't know how to use the kit they've got at all. And maybe only 10% are really using some of the technology appropriately. For example, if you're a student, it's 8 o'clock at night and you're having a problem with a problem, do you automatically phone up your teacher? No, we don't let them do that. Or do I email them and get an answer within a couple of hours? Do I have a pool of teachers who are on email duty until 11 o'clock at night when some of my kids might start going to bed in order to be able to communicate with them and give them some answers or some help? So let's just understand, if what we're saying is we've got kit, but it's in use from 8:30 until 3:30 and then I turn it off, that's not necessarily taking part in the global economy. And so these places with processes, buildings and people and kit are taking place in a society which is changing dramatically fast. And you hear people talking about, behaviours. You know, we'll hear people talking about whether mobile phone masts are bad. Well, these are the debates which we're having. And so we might as well accept that those debates should take place in school, and the opportunities available to people are beyond all belief. And we invented a number of tools, and Stephen was talking about some of them. We used to start off people by putting them into working groups and try and sort of see if we could invent the future by doing flip charts and post-it notes and, you know, put them up on the wall. And has anybody ever taken part in one of those things? You know, you go into discussion, you write a flip note, and then you sort of put them up on the wall, and then you work out which ones are more important than others, and you put scribbles around them, and you put another one up. You might do it electronically, but it's fundamentally the same thing. And then you sort of reprofile it all, and then you put another one together, and then you do some presentations to each other, and you go, yes! And then when you walk home, and your friends say, what do you think of that? You say, what a load of bloody rubbish. So we then started widening it and started realizing that actually we needed more input. Let's get people in there who know what they're talking about. So let's get people who've recently left school or left university. Isn't it surprising how few learning institutions actually find out what's happened to their people afterwards? And yet we've got Facebook. You know, it's all there if we want to form a Facebook community and just find out. And if I'm going to change my curriculum, maybe I should ask the people who've gone through my curriculum 10 years ago, what advice would you give me? Well, no, we've got technology, but we confine its use, almost like, I've got the bit of paper, I'll give you the PDA, and I'll let you use it under certain circumstances. It's not the way the world is going. And we have one tool called Socrates, which is an online tool, and I can share with you some stuff. We ask people, does learning happen in classrooms or does learning happen everywhere? Do you see left and right hand side? And people put a little slider depending where they are. This is one senior leadership team in one school, and as you can see, they were a bit divided about this, although a lot of them said learning happens everywhere. So we said, why are you building a new school then? Why are you spending £26 million building a new school if learning happens everywhere? Oh, well, you know... Let's move on. Okay. And the senior leadership team have been working together for 5 years without any change of staff. I'd like to show you some of the results. In the same leadership team, over on the far left, children get enough learning in lessons. Why would children want to learn during break and lunch as well? That's pretty enlightened. Or learning whilst you're wandering about doesn't happen. I've raised 3 sons, and you need to take the mountain to Mohammed and not expect the mountain to come to you. That's okay. And over on the far right, it would be great to see a student and a teacher discussing an issue other than discipline outside the classroom. And here's something really pathetic. When you've got to go, or you should have gone before, which appears to be about going to the toilet, but it's not. It's about control. It's about my control over your bodily functions as a teacher. And this team was really spread out on this one. Far left, people asked to go to the toilet to waste time. Personal discipline should be insisted on. It'll stand all pupils in good stead later in life. Ill discipline is a modern-day curse. Okay, so you don't let kids go to the loo. Nope, they can just bloody suffer. All right, and do you think they learn a lot about your lesson? Oh, yes, they're still paying attention. No, they're not. They're thinking, what an absolute shit you are. And on the somewhere in the middle here, good grief, are there places where children are still made to ask? Children should also have access to water at all times, because a lot of kids don't drink water because the loos are so awful. And girls should not have to keep their PE teachers fully informed of their menstrual cycles. Teach respect by displaying a little. So come on, if that's where our group are, maybe there's a little bit of work to do before we start talking about kit and technology, and maybe we should get to grips with this. And we had one with ICT as a discrete subject, or ICT tool to deliver all subjects. And I've got about 628 people on this one. And so as you can see, they're a bit over to this way. But when we asked the students were slightly more polarized, because they reckoned that ICT taught in schools should be kept as an ICT lesson, because people don't really know what they're talking about when they say it teaches everything, because they don't actually know, because etc. And so we widened it out and we got people to do different things. And what happened in there is that some assumptions started getting challenged. Do I have to divide people up, based upon them when they were born or stuff? And am I trying to deal with current behaviors, or am I trying to change those? And how should I be running my timetable? Is my curriculum actually relevant to the world? And how should I measure my outcomes? gosh, isn't that hard? Isn't that difficult when I start really trying to measure what I'm trying to achieve, and how should I structure myself, and what opening hours should I have, and how should I communicate between ourselves, between each other? How should I start sharing some of that knowledge? How do I actually share the knowledge which I've got just in my team? It's surprising the number of schools I go to. You might have 100 teachers, some of whom have worked in industry, others have done different things, and they don't actually know what each other knows. They don't necessarily know what contacts each other's got. So when a student is walking down the corridor saying, I've got a problem with this, they can't go immediately to the intranet and say, right, talk to Freddie, he seems to have dealt with something like that. Do you sort of see? And it's quite, some of this stuff isn't that hard. And then what customer service should I have, and what staffing numbers should I have? And we've done other little bits and pieces. In this school, we got the kids to teach the teachers how to use Facebook. And the teachers were sort of a bit aghast, really, because they said, well, how did you learn all this? And the kids were, well, I don't know, really. I just sort of experimented. What, you mean you pressed that button? Yeah, I pressed the button. And the world didn't cave in? No, it didn't cave in, it just said error. So I went back a few times, rebooted it, put my new digital portfolio in, I rebooted the USB at the back, and I sort of started again. And it became very powerful, because then teachers started saying, so how should we be helping you learn some of the stuff which we think you need to learn? And sort of questions came up, well, first of all, do I need to learn it? Which became very scary, because actually, do you need to learn it? And then we started getting other people in, like this is a guy from Google coming in to talk to some schools about where they saw the future of the world. And then you start getting kids to start saying where they see the future and how they want to be helped to participate in that world. And all of a sudden, the bits of technology and the bits of kit around start helping them as they start gaining access for stuff which is important to them. And when I'm talking to UK schools, I say, what would happen if universities started using their own assessments and abandoned reliance upon A-levels? And a lot of schools say, ooh. Well, I was out to lunch with the Russell Group of universities about 4 months ago, and that's exactly what they're planning to do. Because nobody believes anymore that the grades which we've got are necessarily a good indicator as to what your propensity for dealing with the future is, because they're sort of based upon the past, aren't they? You know, they're a point in time, what is your assessment? They don't tell you if you're on the up or on the down or none of that stuff. It's just pinpoint. What happens if major recruiters started using their own assessments and ceased to rely upon GCSE results? Well, guess what? That's exactly what people are starting to do. Why? Because we have got an anarchic system around called the web. I don't have to wait until I get a load of application forms coming in and then read through them. I can start interacting with people live, real time, anywhere. So if I can start working out, and some technology has started to do that, how I can start assessing how quickly people learn, well, that's pretty easy, isn't it? Somebody logs on, I fire them a question and see how long they take to respond to it. So I don't care then if an application form has taken 2 weeks to write with the help of a CV writer and an application form adjusting person, or whether they've just done it on the hoof and this is real. And that's all available. And just supposing teachers worked in other organizations as well as just teaching. If you're trying to teach business, wouldn't it be better if you spent 2 days a year with Sumitomo Bank in Japan and maybe 3 days with Goldman Sachs in New York? Would you be better at teaching business? Almost certainly. And if you did that regularly, might we be better guides to the world for which we're preparing people? And we suggest yes. So when you start piecing all of that together, you can start looking slightly differently. And what I say before we even start thinking about creating a new school is, are you running a school where 1,000 pupils are educated, or a place for 1,000 individuals to discover their talents? And although it sounds the same, it is dramatically different. And I think an awful lot of schools are a bit like this. They meet all the health and safety standards. They've got all the right air quality. They've got all the right technologies. They feed the kids and they feed the chickens an appropriate diet. So if you're going to create corn-fed chickens, you feed them with the right amount of corn. You let them out for 20 minutes every 2 hours so they can scratch around outside. But fundamentally, it's a bit of a factory. And I might adjust it very slightly, but fundamentally, I've got a factory going on. So we prefer people to talk about a learning place as opposed to a school, and then start really questioning, what are the processes which I'm applying? What are the buildings and the kit which I can use to make those processes really good, and what people? And the funny thing about it is, if this is the today and people are imagining where the future is, you've got 3 lots of change going on. We've probably got some change to do with buildings and kit. We've probably got some change to do with processes, and And we've almost certainly got some changes to do with people. And unless I coincide all of those, unless they're all contemporaneous, I can make a terrible mistake. I can provide a load of kit, and I haven't changed the processes, and I haven't retrained the people. And I don't mean training the people in using the kit, but training the people in what the kit can actually do and what it's all about, which might involve changing my processes. Do you sort of see? So it sits in harmony. We have an awful lot of really rubbish schools in really beautiful buildings, and we have a lot of really beautiful schools in really rubbish buildings. So it's not quite as simple as everybody thinks by just writing out a check and giving a load of stuff. And sometimes it's right at the heart of what are you trying to achieve and how am I going to measure whether I'm successful or not. And if society is unfurling very gradually, maybe what I have is I have a series of changes and a series of milestones. You know, we didn't have international, let's throw away our VHSs and let's all go DVDs day, did we? It sort of just happened. But a lot of initiatives which go on in education are sort of like boof, as opposed to a gradual migration. And so we think maybe what we should have is something which is a very gentle, very gradual set of changes, such that when we look back at what's happened in the last 10 years, we can't believe how different it was. So that's our starting point. Does that all make sense? And then from that starting point, one can start really moving to say, what buildings do we need? How should we retrain our people? How should we find out what's going on in the world? How can we benchmark? And then how can we work with our students, our parents, and other people in the community to create a really fantastic learning place? So that's where we sort of begin and end. And we will do whatever we have to do to make that work. I don't know if that gives you a bit of an insight into the way our thinking is going. So thank you very much.